The late afternoon unrolled itself slowly over Willow Street, the sky a low sheet of pewter that promised rain but had not yet delivered. In such towns the weather often felt like a preface to what might come. A hush before conversation, a parenthesis between routines. The market sign above the door of Willow Street Market hummed faintly under the weight of old bulbs. Its letters had the soft exhaustion of places that had served 100 small lives. Naomi Cooper moved against that ordinary backdrop like a private sorrow. She was slender and young, barely 21, and the heaviness she carried was not only that of her body, but of everything that had come before it. Doors closed without ceremony. Jobs that ended when employers discovered she was pregnant. A string of temporary addresses where one slept by the hour rather than by the month. Yet there was about her an almost stubborn gentleness, the kind that does not seek pity but endures it without rancor. She paused beneath the awning, adjusting the thin denim jacket that did little to keep the wind at bay. The hem of her dress was frayed. The soles of her shoes were well worn. A small silver locket swung at her collarbone, catching the dim light like a private star. Her hand found the roundness of her belly, and she breathed once, quietly, as if naming the child inside. She murmured a brief prayer. Not precisely the language of a pulpit, but the low, practical prayers people keep for themselves, that the next hour would pass, that the next person would be kind, that money might appear like rain. Inside the market, Evelyn Thompson was stacking oranges into their familiar pyramid with a deliberation that had long ago become ritual. There are occupations in which repetition is a kind of prayer. Keeping a shop on Willow Street had been such a devotion for Evelyn for 30 years. She had the face of someone accustomed to weathering small cruelties without complaint. Soft lines at the eyes, hands with the map of a lifetime of work, and a voice threaded with the thrift of a person who had learned the arithmetic of survival. She wore a simple blue sweater and a modest silver cross that caught the retail light whenever she turned. When the bell over the door chimed, Evelyn glanced up and saw Naomi enter. The young woman moved with a careful economy, as if reserving motion for more urgent needs. Customers shifted, looked away politely. The market was the kind of place where strangers could remain strangers until pressed together by circumstance. Evelyn approached with the easy courtesy of someone who had spent many years greeting neighbors. "Afternoon, dear," she said, gentle as a small blessing. "You look like you've had a long walk." Naomi gave a faint nod. "Just a loaf of bread," she said. Her voice carried a thinness like a candle fed by a draught. She moved toward the corner where fresh loaves were kept, fingers brushing the paper as if reverence were required to touch food. The world simplified to that act. Reach, select, clutch. It was only a few steps, but the fewest steps can become heavy when a body is tired in ways that are more than muscular. Naomi's vision dimmed at the edges. The market lights seemed to draw thin circles in the air. She stilled for an instant, then the knees buckled with a small, soundless surrender. The loaf slipped from her grasp and rolled under a shelf with a faint skitter. A collective intake of breath moved through the aisles. Mrs. Hazel Brown, who had been choosing tea, said, "Bless her." Mr. Curtis Robinson, who paid his bills at the counter, rose before the rest and stepped forward with the practical directness of an older man who had seen much and wished little fuss. Evelyn was at Naomi's, sighed in 2 strides and lowered herself onto the cool tile with the ease of someone who had tended to wounds and complaints for decades, hands that knew the right pressure for a sprain, the right words to quiet a frightened animal, now rested on Naomi's wrist and forehead to assess the warmth. Naomi's skin was cool and damp. Her mouth was dry. "Can you hear me?" Evelyn asked, not a question of authority, but of presence. Naomi's eyes fluttered open, a pale film that cleared long enough to record the room, the fluorescent hum, the rows of canned tomatoes, the face bent low with an expression of anxious care. "Mama?" Naomi whispered in a voice that was mostly longing. It was not the name of the woman who had birthed her. No one present was that woman, but rather the invocation of the word that holds every child's ache, the wish for someone to gather and keep. Then Naomi's lids slipped closed, and her body relaxed into a sleep that frightened those who watched. A man from the corner fumbled for his phone and called for an ambulance. The town's ambulance, with its small insignia and emergency lights, arrived in a spray of rain which had just begun to fall in earnest. The paramedics were careful, professional. They unrolled their equipment with the practiced speed of people whose lives were punctuated by other people's crises. Naomi woke to their touch and shook her head fiercely. "No," she said, breathless. "Please, I can't go. I don't have—" Her voice thinned further. "They'll take my baby if I can't pay." The words landed like stones. It is possible to learn in a glance the geography of fear. Evelyn saw not merely a reluctance to be transported, but the shaped experience of someone for whom the institution of medicine had once felt like a ledger to be balanced against other losses. There are people who have been told, directly or by implication, that their presence costs others. Naomi had been taught a grim economics. To exist is to risk being a burden. Evelyn's mind moved quickly, as if sorting a list into order of necessity. She could have insisted on hospital care. She could have made the paramedics take Naomi away. She could have signed forms she did not fully understand. Instead, she found herself asking the paramedics to wait while she fetched a blanket and a warm drink, and then she asked if they would leave Naomi in her custody for the night, ensuring them that she would call at any sign of decline. The younger paramedic hesitated. There are rules and liabilities that govern emergency work, but the look on Naomi's face, raw with fear, made him human before he was an agent of procedure. He agreed with a spoken caveat, "If she worsens, call us immediately." That night the back room became a small constellation of care. Evelyn placed Naomi on a narrow cot that had once belonged to her husband. She wrapped the girl in the old sweater she had removed. The lamp on a folding table threw a small, generous pool of light. Around them sat the ordinary artifacts of a long-lived trade: boxes of flour, a battered radio, a ledger with a spine crease. The storm drummed a soft pattern on the roof, and the neon sign outside blinked half-blind in the rain. Naomi slept, but not the deep sleep that erases fear. It was the tremulous doze of someone who must wake often to test if mercy has held its promise. Evelyn watched her, the observation folded into something more than pity. It was a measuring of souls. She noticed the small silver locket at Naomi's throat, tarnished and worn, and wondered whose face might appear inside. Almost by accident she thought of a photograph she kept, a portrait of her daughter, Sarah, whose smile had once occupied the center place of Evelyn's home. The resemblance, when she let herself notice, was a soft, unsure thing, a curve of mouth, the particular set of the brow. It stirred in Evelyn a feeling that was not yet named. She procured a bowl of thin broth, warming it over the small kettle, and held it to Naomi's lips when the girl blinked awake. Naomi took it with grateful small movements, and in the simple exchange there was a seam that closed, a transaction of humility and dignity. Evelyn sat in the lamplight and recited small, ordinary things to anchor the night. Names of the streets for the man who had once lived on the hill, a recipe for a stew that never quite tasted the same twice, until Naomi's face softened and sleep returned. When Naomi dozed again, she murmured, half in dream and half in memory, words that were barely audible. "Mama," she said. Mama said to keep it close. She said it would bring me back. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the edge of the cot, as if she had been touched by a hand that reached across years. Evelyn could have urged Naomi to talk, to tell the story of why she had been alone and afraid. But mercy sometimes begins by listening to what a heart will give freely rather than probing what it will hold fast. So she waited, and in the waiting she felt the small miracle of a decision forming in her. She would not send Naomi away into the cold bureaucracy of a distant hospital when she could shelter her now. Outside, the rain swelled and then softened to a gentle insistence. The neon sign hummed. The bell above the door had the distant memory of customers, and the market assumed its ordinary role as witness to the small comings and goings of a town. Within the storeroom, the lamp dipped and threw shadows like shawls on the walls, and Naomi slept on, held by a borrowed sweater and the presence of a woman who had chosen, in a quiet hour, to be kind. That night, Willow Street Market was witness to a small, precise compassion. A poor black pregnant girl had collapsed in a doorway and been met not with judgment, but with shelter. The evening, ordinary and unremarkable to anyone who had not been there, contained in its seams the beginning of a story that would ask of its people faith, sacrifice, and kindness. For now it was simply the night a woman slept under the watch of another, and the world, impermanent and vast, held its breath with them. Morning did not so much arrive as seep quietly through the cracks of Willow Street. After the long rain, the air smelled faintly of iron and bread. The market sign outside still blinked on its own schedule, as though unaware that night had ended. Inside, Evelyn Thompson moved softly between shelves, her steps instinctively quiet, so as not to wake the girl in the storeroom. Naomi Cooper slept uneasily on the narrow cot, her breathing shallow, one hand resting protectively across her stomach. The light from the small lamp above her cast an amber circle on her face, gentle but insufficient to erase the traces of exhaustion that hunger and fear had carved there. Her skin was damp with the residue of last night's storm, her hair coiled in small curls that clung to her temples. Beside her on the table sat a cup of water, half empty, and the silver locket glinting faintly, that single consistent shimmer, as if light insisted on finding her. Evelyn watched her for a long time from the doorway, hands clasped loosely before her. There were things she had learned in her 58 years that required no instruction: how to fold pain neatly into prayer, how to recognize the difference between someone who was simply tired and someone who was being quietly undone by life. Naomi was the latter. Evelyn's first impulse always was to fix, to feed, to clean, to mend. But this morning she found herself hesitating. What Naomi needed, perhaps, was not repair but refuge. And refuge requires the sort of patience that asks you to sit with the brokenness rather than erase it. She turned toward the counter when a knock startled her. It was Mr. Curtis Robinson, his figure framed in the glass door, rain still dripping from his hat brim. He stepped in with a nod. "You kept her here last night, Miss Evelyn?" "I did," Evelyn answered. She didn't want the ambulance. Too frightened. Said she couldn't pay. Curtis frowned, taking off his hat. "The poor thing's just a child." "Yes," Evelyn said softly. "But she's been living like someone 3 times her age." Curtis rubbed his chin. "I can run over to the clinic, see if Doc Ward can come take a look. Won't charge for a kind act. He's that sort of man." "Please do," Evelyn said, grateful. She busied herself making tea while he went, the sound of his boots fading into the soft hum of the street. Back in the storeroom, Naomi stirred. She blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling, then winced, her hand instinctively clutching her belly. Evelyn hurried over, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "It's all right, dear," she murmured. "You're safe. You fainted last night, but you're all right now." Naomi looked around, dazed. Where am I?" "At Willow Street Market. I own the place," Evelyn said with a small smile. "You came in for bread, remember?" Naomi's eyes filled as memory returned. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Trouble?" Evelyn said, shaking her head. "Child, you nearly collapsed on my floor. The only trouble would have been leaving you there." Naomi tried to sit up, but her strength failed her. Evelyn helped her gently, adjusting the pillow behind her back. "I called the doctor," Evelyn said. "Just to take a look." "He won't send a bill." Naomi tensed immediately, shaking her head. "No, please, no doctor. I'll be fine." Evelyn's voice softened, as though speaking to a frightened animal. "He's a kind man. And he won't ask for money." Still, Naomi's fingers twisted into the blanket. "You don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't let anyone report me. If they find out—" She stopped, swallowing the rest. Evelyn leaned closer. "Find out what, sweetheart?" Naomi's gaze drifted downward. "That I have nowhere to go." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. The words were not dramatic. They were spoken with the weary resignation of someone who had rehearsed them often. Then, Evelyn said quietly, "You can stay here for now. Until you figure things out." Naomi's head lifted in disbelief. "Here, in the store?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "There's a cot and hot tea and a roof that leaks only a little. It's not much, but it's safe." Naomi's lip trembled. "Why would you help me?" The question came as if it were foreign to her, as if kindness were a dialect she had forgotten. Evelyn thought for a moment before answering. "Because somebody once helped me. That's how the world keeps turning. One hand to another." Before Naomi could respond, the front bell jingled again. Curtis returned, followed by Dr. Malik Ward, a tall man in his 40s with the practiced calm of someone who had seen both miracles and losses without losing faith in either. He removed his hat and gave Naomi a reassuring nod. "I just wanted to make sure you're all right, ma'am," he said gently. Naomi shrank back, pulling the blanket closer. "I don't want the hospital." "No hospital," Dr. Ward assured her. "Just a check, all right? I'll stay right here." Evelyn stood nearby as the doctor knelt beside the cot. He checked Naomi's pulse, asked her a few quiet questions, and listened to her breathing. "You're dehydrated," he said kindly, "and your blood pressure's low. You need rest and food." But the baby's heartbeat, strong and steady. "That's a good sign." Naomi closed her eyes, tears slipping down. Evelyn felt a lump rise in her own throat. "Eat what Miss Evelyn gives you," the doctor added, "and try not to worry. You're in good hands here." When he left, Naomi seemed smaller somehow, but also lighter, as if the assurance had briefly loosened something that had been wound tight for too long. Evelyn brought her tea, sweetened just a little, and sat beside her as the clock hummed quietly in the other room. "Did you mean it?" Naomi asked after a while, her voice uncertain. "That I can stay?" "I meant it," Evelyn said. "For a few days until you get your strength back." Naomi stared at her hands. "I don't want people talking bad about you." Evelyn smiled. "People will always talk, dear. The trick is not to listen when they forget to be kind." Outside, the storm clouds began to thin. Light found its way through the glass front of the market, touching the counter where Evelyn had spent so many years. She had long thought her world was finished, that her days would pass in the company of shelves and ledgers, the quiet hum of a store half forgotten by time. But now, as she looked at Naomi, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose, sudden and unbidden. As afternoon settled, Evelyn fixed a small meal, scrambled eggs and toast, the modest luxury of butter spread thin. Naomi ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it were more than food. Afterward, Evelyn coaxed her into telling small details about her life, the safe ones, the ones that didn't hurt to say. "I grew up in Greenville," Naomi said softly. "Mama got sick when I was little. After she passed, I lived with my aunt, but she had her own children. When I turned 18, I left. Thought I'd find work. I did, cleaning houses mostly. But when I told them I was expecting, they let me go." Evelyn listened in silence, eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window. There was nothing to add that wouldn't sound hollow. "I didn't even know where I was walking yesterday," Naomi admitted. "I just kept going." "And somehow you found my store," Evelyn murmured. "Or maybe you were sent." Naomi gave a small, uncertain smile. "You really think that?" Evelyn glanced at the silver locket, still resting against Naomi's collarbone. "I think sometimes the good Lord puts us exactly where we're meant to be, even when we're too lost to see it." Naomi turned her face away to hide the tears. Evelyn pretended not to notice, instead rising to refill the tea. By evening, Naomi had fallen asleep again, her breathing calm and even. Evelyn sat by her side, the lamplight turning her gray hair into a halo of soft gold. For a long time she simply watched the girl sleep. It was then that she noticed the locket had come undone. The clasp was delicate, worn from years of worry. Inside were two tiny faded photographs. The first was of a dark-skinned woman smiling shyly at the camera. The second, Evelyn's heart stopped for a beat, was of a younger woman she knew well, her own daughter, Sarah. She inhaled sharply, the room spinning slightly. Sarah had passed 10 years ago. A car accident, a phone call at midnight, and a silence that had never entirely ended. Yet there she was, in the photograph, her arm around the woman Naomi had called her mother. Evelyn pressed the locket closed again, careful not to wake the girl. The faint hum of the market seemed louder now, the hum of fate rearranging itself quietly behind the scenes. "Lord," Evelyn whispered, barely audible, "if this is you, give me strength to do what's right." The lamp flickered once, then steadied. Evelyn took that for an answer. Outside, the rain had stopped. Willow Street, washed clean, reflected the amber glow of streetlights on wet pavement. In the storeroom, Naomi slept soundly, unaware that the woman who had taken her in was not merely a stranger, but a thread, long lost, from her family's own tapestry. And as Evelyn looked at her again, she realized with quiet awe that what she had mistaken for coincidence might very well have been providence. The morning after the rain left Willow Street rinsed and bright, the market took on the ordinary business of a small town waking up. Birds argued on telephone wires, a paper bag from the bakery whipped past a stoop and lodged against the curb. Inside Willow Street Market, Evelyn moved with a calm that had the quality of someone who stitched a routine to hold the day together. There was comfort in simple inventories, the stack of flour sacks, the neat row of coffee canisters, the careful tally in the ledger that would tell her how the week had fared. The market's hum was the sound of life continuing. In the small storeroom, wrapped in Evelyn's sweater, Naomi sat propped against a pillow and watched the world with a cautious hunger. Sleep had cleaned some of the fever from her face. Her hand rested over the small swell of the child she carried, and she would sometimes press a finger to her belly as if to check the steady answer beneath her palm. The locket at her throat, the one with the tiny photographs, had been tucked safely beneath her shirt at Evelyn's request, and the clasp lay warm against her skin. Evelyn brought a plate of toast and an egg, simple nourishment that felt lavish to Naomi. She ate slowly, like someone relearning the measure of food. The two women sat in companionable silence at first, the kind that builds trust without speech. Then Evelyn reached across the small table and took Naomi's hand, not with pity but with companionable firmness. "You did the right thing coming in," Evelyn said. "There are people who see and close their doors. Not everyone does." Naomi's eyes slid away, dazzled by a light she had not expected. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice had a new softness, the raw edges smoothing. "Mostly, I thought maybe if I walked long enough I would find somewhere that looked like home." "You found a market," Evelyn said. "Sometimes a market becomes a home for a little while if you let it." Her smile was small but steady. "Stay as long as you need to." Naomi's shoulders lowered as if someone had loosened a strap. "But you don't know me," she said. "You don't have to help me." Evelyn's hand tightened a fraction. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I saw a girl that looked like she needed a warm hand. It's not always about the knowing." She glanced toward a shelf. "And besides, Miss Naomi, if you're going to be here, someone has to teach you how to properly butter toast." The small joke landed like a pebble dropped into a glass. Rings spread. Naomi's lips twitched into a real smile. Laughter, even the briefest, has a habit of loosening pain. It made the room warmer. That day followed a gentle rhythm of small mercies. Evan, a delivery boy who sweated through the late mornings bringing crates of fruit, dropped in with an extra thermos of coffee and a newspaper. He listened quietly while Naomi tried on stories about her past for size, trimming them of shame and keeping what could be born in daylight. He left with a promise to look out for day work, and that evening he returned with the modest news that a woman in town needed someone to help tidy a house twice a week. It was not much, but it was work, and for Naomi the knowledge that there was a way to pay for diapers and baby formula steadied something inside. During the quiet hours between customers, Pastor Daniel dropped by. He came with a little jar of honey and the comfort of a voice that belonged to the town's memory. Naomi was shy with him at first, unused to formal kindness that did not require something in return. He read aloud from a small book of Psalms, not as a sermon, but as an old story told by the fireside. The words made room in Naomi's chest for things that had been starved. "You'll need to see the clinic about prenatal vitamins," Pastor Daniel said when he rose to leave. "I'll take you if you like." Naomi's eyes filled. "Thank you," she said, soft and bewildered. The idea that someone might take time for her was almost more than she could hold. As days lengthened into a week, Naomi began to mend in ways that the ledger could not record. The color returned to her cheeks. Her steps steadied. She began to laugh at small things, particularly when Evelyn recounted the time she had tried to teach her husband to bake and had produced a cake with the consistency of a stone. Naomi's laughter was a fern growing in poor soil, resilient and improbable. The townspeople watched the small tableau with their own mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Mrs. Hazel Brown, who tended to interpret the world as a sequence of moral lessons and punctuation marks, tutted when she saw Naomi lingering by the storefront. Yet the same Mrs. Hazel, who had first been inclined to gossip, was the one who later dropped off a knitted blanket and a second-hand warmer, muttering that no baby should be cold. Human beings in towns are like that, quick to judge, quicker to relent. One afternoon, while Naomi folded boxes and learned the minor choreography of the register, she asked about the photograph in Evelyn's parlor she had glimpsed the day before. She had seen it in a frame, a woman with hair like a sunrise and a smile that seemed to catch the light. Naomi asked because the question had been turning in her mind, and questions that turn too long demand to be answered. Evelyn paused, her hands mid-fold, and the air between them took on the weight of a memory. "That was my Sarah," she said quietly. "She died 10 years ago." "We were close. Closest thing I had." The words came on a tide of memory. Grief sat in them like a stone. Naomi's face changed in that instant. Something in her expression folded inward like a petal closing. She had not meaningfully spoken the name of Evelyn's daughter, yet the locket at her throat, tucked away beneath shirt and blanket, seemed to pulse with a private warmth. Evelyn noticed it out of the corner of her eye and felt a prickle at the back of her neck, as if the air had arranged itself into meaning. "Tell me about her," Naomi said in a voice that was at once steady and curious. She expected perhaps a small quiet tale. She did not expect the thread that would begin to weave their histories together. Evelyn spoke then, first in stops, the way truth often begins when cautious, then in a ribbon as the words found their rhythm. She recounted afternoons by the creek, a girl who loved the sound of trains, a wedding plan that had become a postcard of a life never lived. She told of the day the telephone rang, and the blur of lights, and the hush that followed in a household that had known too well the arithmetic of absence. Naomi listened with an attention that felt like sacrament. When Evelyn reached the part where she described Sarah's photo, how she had taken one silly picture with a friend at the county fair, Naomi's hand moved imperceptibly to her locket. She remembered the edges of the photograph in her palm. Two faces leaning close in the way of friends or family. That night, after the store had closed and the street had emptied to the honest hush of small towns, Naomi pulled the locket open and looked for the photograph she had glimpsed. The little image was faded, nearly eaten by time, but its outline remained. There, in miniature and grain, was a young white woman who, if light and distance were allowed their flattering illusions, had the same shy, bright mouth that Evelyn described. Beside her, in a smaller portrait, was a dark-skinned woman smiling into the camera. Naomi recognized the face with a quiet certainty that felt ridiculous to voice, but true all the same. She sat with the locket in her palm until the moon hung low and silver over the storefront. In the smallness of that moment, something like a lineage, one not written in official documents, began to hum. Naomi thought of stories her mother had once told in fragments. A girl named Sarah who used to visit, an afternoon of tea and laughter recorded in a Polaroid, a promise unkept. Naomi had always assumed those were kindnesses, little lights in a life. Now those lights arranged themselves differently, like constellations revealing a map. She did not speak of this to Evelyn that night. There was an inner prudence in her, a reluctance to place sudden certainty in the hands of fate when fate had sometimes been careless. Instead, she lay down and listened to the rhythms of the market, the distant rumble of a truck, the whisper of a page turning in the ledger, the occasional creak of a loose floorboard. There was a new softness to the sounds now, as if the market itself had settled into its role as protector. Days turned to weeks, and Naomi's presence became less an oddity and more a part of the market's furniture. She learned to balance the till, to fold the aprons, to greet the regulars by name. When a customer asked for a suggestion for stew, she would answer with a sober expertise that surprised them. Her confidence grew like a plant finding a crack in the stone and pushing a tendril through. One afternoon, Mrs. Hazel Brown, who had once tutted and judged, brought cups for everyone and, with the quiet diplomacy of those who have softened, offered to teach Naomi how to knit. Naomi accepted, fingers clumsy at first, then patient. The knitting taught her another kind of rhythm, that of counting and patience, of making small stitches that, gathered together, become a whole. Evelyn watched all of it with a protectiveness that had the shape of a promise. The market's ledgers improved by small increments. Naomi's wages, when they began to trickle in for her cleaning work, were set aside under Evelyn's gentle counsel for baby needs. Evelyn wrote lists, supplies to buy, names of social workers to call, appointments to make, and checked them off with that careful hand. She began to sleep with a less hollow ache. On a Tuesday afternoon, as the sun slanted through the high window and painted a bar of gold across the counter, Pastor Daniel arrived with a small bundle from the clinic, prenatal vitamins, and a pamphlet about classes. He sat down, folded his hands, and said simply, "Naomi, you're going to have people in your corner." The promise was like a small harvest, care that would be useful, practical, immediate. Naomi's smile in answer was slow and genuine. "Thank you," she said. The two words had come to carry all the weight of the scene, gratitude, acknowledgement, and something like hope. And in the quiet that followed, when the market's bell chimed each arrival and departure, Evelyn and Naomi moved through their days with an intimacy that was not yet family, but felt like the first draft of one. Where Naomi had entered as a frightened stranger, she began to live as a person who belonged, slowly, and with the caution of someone who had learned to expect little. Little by little, the market became shelter not only for her body, but for a heart that had been bruised by absence. Outside, on Willow Street, life went on. Mail arrived, the barber swept his stoop, children ran with paper planes. The world of small mercies continued, and inside Willow Street Market, a silver locket containing 2 faded photographs hummed gently as if a story was readying itself to be told in full. Morning crept gently into Willow Street Market, the kind of soft dawn that paints dust motes gold and sets the simplest things aglow. A glass jar, the brass bell on the door, the faint sheen on a polished counter. It was quiet still, save for the faint hum of the old refrigerator in the corner and the flutter of paper signs on the window pane. In the storeroom, Naomi Cooper stirred. The world was different in early light, less harsh, less watchful. She sat up slowly, adjusting the blanket over her knees, and listened to the sound of rainwater dripping from the awning outside. She pressed her palm to her belly. The baby had kicked twice before dawn, as though reminding her that life was still pressing forward, no matter how unready the world seemed to be. She reached for her locket. The silver had tarnished slightly over the years, but under her thumb it felt alive, a small pulse of memory. She whispered a prayer, her voice barely a breath. Father in heaven, if you hear me, thank you for this day. Thank you for Miss Evelyn, for the roof, for the bread. Please help me to stay strong for my baby. Please don't let me be afraid. The words rose quietly, like mist, then disappeared into the stillness. Evelyn stood in the doorway, unseen for a moment. She had come to check if Naomi needed breakfast, but she stopped short when she heard that prayer. The sound of it, soft, sincere, unpracticed, touched something deep in her chest. It reminded her of mornings long ago when her daughter Sarah used to whisper grace before school, her voice lilting with childlike certainty. Evelyn hadn't prayed aloud since the funeral. Now, listening to Naomi, she felt the faint stirring of something she had buried under practicality and grief. Faith, or the beginning of it. Evelyn stepped forward. "You pray beautiful, dear," she said softly. Naomi startled, then smiled shyly. "Oh, I didn't mean for you to hear." "Don't apologize," Evelyn said. "Sometimes those prayers are the truest kind, the quiet ones, said in rooms no one visits." Naomi lowered her eyes. "It's just, when everything went wrong, praying was all I had left." Evelyn nodded slowly, setting a steaming cup of tea on the small table. "It's the same for many of us, I think. When there's nothing left, the only place left to look is up." They sat for a while in silence, listening to the gentle rhythm of rain against the windows. It wasn't the heavy storm from before, just a light, cleansing drizzle, the kind that makes you want to sit still and listen. Evelyn's eyes wandered to the locket at Naomi's neck. She wanted to ask again about it, about the photograph she'd glimpsed the night before, but she stopped herself. The right questions, she decided, come only when the heart is ready to answer. "Would you like to help me in the front today?" Evelyn asked instead. "Keep your hands busy a bit." Naomi nodded, grateful. She wanted to move to do something useful. Together they tidied the aisles, restocked shelves, and dusted the front counter. It felt ordinary, but the ordinariness was soothing. For Naomi, the market became a small sanctuary, a place where no one asked what she could pay, only how she was feeling. For Evelyn, it became a small church, each act of kindness a kind of worship. By midday, customers trickled in. Familiar faces, some curious, some kind. Mr. Curtis Robinson dropped off a bag of oranges and winked. "For the lady in the back room," he said. "Doctor's orders. She needs vitamin C." Naomi blushed, murmuring thanks. Evelyn smiled and added, "He means well. This town may gossip, but it also feeds its own." After the customers left, Naomi leaned against the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. "People here are different," she said. Evelyn tilted her head. "Different good or different bad?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Good, I'm not used to people noticing if I'm all right." Evelyn's gaze softened. "Oh, they notice. They just don't always know how to show it." She paused, then added, "You remind them of something they've forgotten. That kindness isn't charity. It's neighborly." Naomi looked down, tracing circles on the counter with her fingertip. Miss Evelyn, do you think—" She hesitated. "Do you think God sends people? Like, on purpose?" Evelyn considered the question carefully, her hands folded before her. "Sometimes," she said at last. "Sometimes he sends the ones who are lost to help the ones who thought they were found." Naomi looked up, eyes bright. "I think he sent me here," Evelyn's voice caught. "Maybe he did, sweetheart. Maybe he did." That evening, after they closed the market, Evelyn showed Naomi the small prayer book that had belonged to Sarah. The pages were fragile, the corners bent, but in the margins were notes written in her daughter's neat handwriting. Verses, questions, small thoughts about kindness. Naomi traced the inked lines with her fingertips. "She had faith," Evelyn said, "even when I didn't." "She sounds like someone I'd like to have known," Naomi whispered. Evelyn smiled, though her eyes glistened. "I think you two would have liked each other." Later, when Naomi had gone to rest, Evelyn lingered in the front of the market. The light was low. The rain had stopped. She stood by the window and watched the reflection of the street lamps glimmer on the wet pavement. Somewhere inside her chest, faith, the fragile, human kind, stirred again. She folded her hands, uncertain how to begin after so many silent years, and whispered, "Lord, I don't know what you're doing, but thank you for bringing her here." The market's lights flickered once, as if in acknowledgement. That night, Naomi dreamed. She stood in a field, holding her child, and saw a woman at a distance, smiling, radiant, her hair the color of light. The woman reached out, her lips forming silent words. Naomi couldn't hear them, but she understood them all the same. When she woke, tears were on her face. Morning would come soon, bringing new things neither woman could yet name. But for now, in the quiet breath between night and dawn, faith hummed softly through the walls of Willow Street Market. Not loud, not demanding, but persistent, like the first note of a hymn that would one day be sung in full. By the end of the week, Willow Street had begun to notice. It was impossible not to. Naomi Cooper, the poor black pregnant girl who had fainted at the grocery, was now behind the counter of that same market, laughing softly as she folded bags or refilled the fruit bins. She wasn't a secret anymore. The doorbell chimed for customers, and with every purchase came a new whisper, a new look that lingered a little too long. Small towns had always been experts at seeing without asking without listening, and judging without meaning to. Evelyn Thompson had lived here long enough to recognize the tone, that faintly pitying hum that rolled under polite talk. It began with good intentions, as gossip often does. A woman from the church mentioned Naomi during tea. That poor girl Evelyn took in, brave of her truly, though I do wonder what kind of trouble she's bringing. By Sunday, the story had grown legs. Someone claimed Naomi was an unwed mother from the city. Someone else said she'd been living on the streets. Another whispered she'd been mixed up with the law. None of it was said cruelly, not at first, but in the way people like to stretch compassion only as far as comfort allows. When Evelyn heard it first, through Mrs. Hazel Brown's hesitant mention, she felt that slow, old ache of disappointment that visits kind people when they realize kindness still has a price. "I heard some folks talking after service," Hazel had said, her voice low, stirring sugar into her tea. "You know how people are. I told them you've always had a good heart, but maybe you should be careful, Evelyn. Folks can turn quick." Evelyn had smiled politely. "Let them talk," she said. "I don't take attendance at their conversations." Still, the words stayed with her like dust that refuses to be swept away. Naomi sensed it too, the glances that lasted half a second too long, the way certain women paused before responding to her "good morning." It wasn't outright cruelty. It was the kind of cool distance reserved for people the town hadn't yet decided whether to forgive. One afternoon, while unpacking a crate of canned peaches, Naomi looked up to see two women standing near the counter, whispering. When she smiled at them, they smiled back, but their eyes darted toward her belly before lowering quickly. Evelyn noticed and came over, setting down a crate with deliberate force. "Ladies," she said with gentle formality, "you'll find the sugar on the back shelf, not at my employees' expense." The two women flushed and made quick exits. Naomi blinked in surprise. "Miss Evelyn, you didn't have to—" "Yes, I did," Evelyn said firmly. "Kindness is not an invitation for disrespect." Naomi looked down, embarrassed. "They don't mean harm. They just don't know me," Evelyn softened. "Then they'll have to learn." The Lord didn't ask us to be small just to make other people comfortable. She went back to arranging produce, but her hands trembled slightly. She hated conflict. Yet some things, she thought, required a steady spine. Mercy was only mercy when it refused to hide. That Sunday, Naomi asked if she might go to church. Evelyn hesitated. She wanted Naomi to feel welcome, but she also knew how people could be when given a new subject to discuss. Still, she nodded. "If you want to, we'll go." They walked together down Willow Street in the soft gold of morning. Naomi wore one of Evelyn's old dresses, pale blue cotton, slightly loose, and her hair, freshly washed, glistened under the sun. She looked fragile and strong all at once. As they entered Willow Baptist Church, the murmurs began, small as rustling leaves. The pews filled with familiar faces, faces that smiled at Evelyn every week, shared coffee after service, brought pies on her birthday. Now those same faces held a mixture of curiosity and confusion. Naomi kept her head bowed, clutching her small Bible like a shield. Evelyn sat beside her, back straight, chin lifted. When Pastor Daniel Lopez saw them, his eyes softened. He gave them a nod, the kind that says, "You're safe here." He began his sermon not with thunder, but with gentleness. "Brothers and sisters, there's a verse I want to share this morning. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." The congregation murmured its agreement, unaware that the words were aimed directly, lovingly, at them. Naomi wept quietly through the hymn that followed. The sound of voices rising around her, voices that moments before had been judgmental, felt like both a rebuke and a benediction. After the service, Pastor Daniel approached them by the steps. "Miss Naomi," he said warmly, "we're glad you came. You've reminded us what faith looks like when it walks in the door." Naomi smiled shyly. "Thank you, Pastor." He turned to Evelyn. "You've done a good thing," he said quietly. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Evelyn nodded, her eyes misting. "Sometimes doing good feels like standing in the rain," she said. Pastor Daniel smiled. "Then let it rain, Miss Evelyn. The rain grows what judgment cannot." The following week, things began to shift. Slowly at first, but then like thawing ice. Mrs. Hazel Brown, who had been the most cautious, arrived one afternoon with a knitted blanket, muttering that babies come early when you least expect it. Mr. Curtis Robinson brought Naomi a small radio, saying every child deserved music to fall asleep to. And the same two women who had whispered in the market came by again, this time to apologize, awkwardly, cheeks red. They bought groceries they didn't need, fumbling over their words, and Naomi, with her quiet grace, thanked them sincerely. The market grew warmer, not just in light, but in spirit. The whispers that once carried suspicion now carried something softer, admiration, even awe. It's a small miracle of human nature that when kindness endures long enough, it often shames gossip into silence. But even as peace returned, Evelyn found herself increasingly haunted by the photograph in Naomi's locket, the image of her late daughter, Sarah. At night, after Naomi had gone to bed, Evelyn would sit by the lamp and look at her daughter's picture on the wall. She would think of that locket and the possibility it carried. Could it be coincidence? Or something else? Something designed by a hand larger than her own understanding? She prayed, not for answers but for clarity. "Lord," she whispered, "if there's a reason she's here, if she's part of something you've been trying to tell me, then I'll listen. Just help me understand." The lamp flickered once, steadying again. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, whispering softly against the glass. Naomi, meanwhile, was beginning to feel the stirrings of new life. The baby kicked stronger now, reminding her daily of both her fragility and her strength. Each night she would sit by the storeroom window, look up at the stars, and hum softly to her unborn child. She didn't know why she always chose the same tune, a lullaby her mother used to sing. One night, Evelyn paused outside the door and froze. She recognized the melody. Sarah had sung that same tune when she was a child. The same words, the same rise and fall. Evelyn's hand trembled on the doorknob. The universe, it seemed, was speaking in whispers now. She didn't interrupt. She simply leaned against the frame and listened as Naomi's voice wove through the dark like a prayer. Low, tender, filled with hope. When the song ended, Evelyn wiped her eyes quietly and whispered into the still air, You sent her, didn't you? In the quiet heart of Willow Street Market, two women, one carrying life, the other carrying loss, began to move toward a truth that would soon change them both. The town that had judged was now watching, humbled and silent, as something beyond its comprehension unfolded among its aisles. A miracle, not loud or dramatic, but gentle, the kind that grows quietly under the roof of mercy. Evening settled over Willow Street with the unhurried grace of a tired soul easing into rest. The market's lights dimmed one by one, until only the small lamp in the back room remained, a quiet sentinel over the life that had taken root there. Evelyn Thompson sat at her kitchen table upstairs, her hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea gone cold. The walls of the apartment above the market were lined with memories that had grown still from disuse, family photographs fading at the corners, small porcelain figurines gathering dust, and a single framed portrait of a young woman with hair like sunlight and a smile that could turn a gray morning golden. Sarah Thompson. Even after 10 years, Evelyn still found herself looking at that picture and waiting for it to breathe. The night was unusually quiet. From below she could hear Naomi humming softly, the same gentle lullaby that had carried through the storeroom all week. The melody tugged at her memory with delicate persistence, pulling her backward through time like a tide returning to shore. She set down her cup and rose slowly, the ache in her knees reminding her that years had passed without permission. Moving to the bookshelf, she pulled free an old photo album, the kind with worn leather corners and pages that smelled faintly of glue and dust. She sat again, opening it to the beginning. There was Sarah at 5 years old, standing in front of the same market that Evelyn still ran, her pigtails uneven, her dress too big. Next, a photo of her holding a kitten, her grin wide and toothless. Then another, Sarah at 17, eyes bright, one arm around a young black woman whose laughter was captured mid-breath. Evelyn's fingers paused over that photograph. The name rose unbidden. Denise Cooper, Sarah's college roommate, her best friend, the one who had visited one summer, a lively, kind-hearted girl who used to help in the market for a few weeks. Evelyn remembered her well, the way she'd called her Miss E, how she'd made Sarah laugh until she cried. They had lost touch after graduation. Sarah had written her name in a few letters. Denise moved to Greenville. She's expecting a baby soon. And then nothing more. Evelyn's heart quickened. Cooper. Naomi's last name was Cooper. She felt the air around her shift. That strange, trembling sense that life was aligning unseen threads. She stared at the photo longer. Denise's smile was unmistakable, and though years had passed, Evelyn could now see traces of her in Naomi. The same soft jawline, the same warmth in her eyes. Her hands trembled as she whispered aloud, "Lord, is this what you've been trying to tell me?" She closed the album, unable to bear the weight of revelation all at once. The room seemed both too large and too small. She walked to the window, looking down at the street below where the faint glow of the market sign flickered against the wet pavement. The air smelled of rain and something else, something like memory revived. She thought of the night Naomi had first collapsed in her store, the silver locket clutched in her trembling hand. Evelyn had brushed past it then, thinking it only a keepsake. Now she knew. The locket, the photo inside, had been Denise and Sarah. It was no accident Naomi had walked into her market. No accident at all. Downstairs, Naomi was washing the last of the dishes, humming softly. The sound carried up through the floorboards, threading into Evelyn's heart like sunlight through lace. She remembered the last time she had heard that tune. It was 10 years ago, the night before the accident. Sarah had been sitting on the porch steps, strumming that same melody on her guitar. Evelyn had stood at the kitchen window, watching her daughter laugh at something she couldn't hear. She'd thought about stepping outside to join her, but she'd been too tired, too preoccupied with tomorrow's deliveries. She told herself there would be time later. There hadn't been. The phone call had come just after midnight, a car skidding off wet asphalt, a name spoken softly by a stranger on the other end of the line. Evelyn had lived through 1,000 mornings since then, but each one felt slightly misplaced, as though the sun rose on a world that no longer belonged to her, until Naomi. This young woman, this frightened, faithful, undeserving girl, had walked into her store and, unknowingly, reopened a door Evelyn thought was sealed forever. Now, sitting by the window with the album open in her lap, Evelyn let the grief come. It was not the sharp, suffocating grief of those first months, but a slow, clean ache, the kind that reminds you that sorrow, too, is proof of love. She spoke softly into the room, as though addressing her daughter. "I think I've found her, Sarah. Denise's child. The one you used to talk about. She's here. She's been here all along." A tear slipped down her cheek, landing on the page. Later that night, Evelyn went down to the storeroom. The lamp was still burning softly beside Naomi's cot. Naomi was half asleep, her hand resting on her belly, the locket gleaming faintly against her throat. Evelyn approached quietly, unsure if she should wake her. For a moment she simply watched, the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest, the peaceful curve of her lips. She whispered, not to Naomi but to something larger, "You've brought her home, haven't you, after all these years?" Naomi stirred, murmuring softly in her sleep. Evelyn smiled faintly and sat on the chair beside her, keeping vigil until dawn. The storm that had gathered in Evelyn's heart for 10 long years began, at last, to break. By morning, Evelyn's face was lined not with sorrow but with purpose. She went about her chores with renewed energy, wiping shelves, sweeping floors, humming under her breath. Naomi noticed the difference immediately. "You're in a good mood today, Miss Evelyn," she said with a teasing smile. Evelyn chuckled softly. "Maybe I am. Maybe it's about time." Naomi tilted her head. "You look like you've seen a miracle." Evelyn paused, her hand resting on a stack of tins. "Maybe I have." She didn't elaborate, and Naomi didn't press, but something in the air between them had changed, grown warmer, deeper. Naomi didn't know that Evelyn had stayed up all night whispering prayers of gratitude, or that she had spoken her daughter's name aloud for the first time in years. And Evelyn didn't know that Naomi, before falling asleep, had dreamed of a woman with golden hair and a voice like music. A woman who smiled and said, "You're safe now, neither needed to." Some truths move quietly, like seeds germinating in the dark, waiting for the right season to bloom. Outside, Willow Street came to life again. Children racing their bicycles, the postman whistling, the church bell marking noon. Life had gone on as it always does. But inside the market the air had shifted. Evelyn looked at Naomi, at the curve of her smile, the way she moved with quiet grace, and thought, "She's the closest thing I've had to family in a decade." And though she didn't say it aloud, she made a silent vow. Whatever this girl's future held, she would not face it alone. Sunday mornings on Willow Street were always the same, the smell of bread from the bakery, the low hum of conversation as neighbors walked to church, and the soft tolling of the bell that carried through the air like memory. Inside Willow Street Market, the light was gentle, dust dancing in its beams. Evelyn had opened the store later than usual that morning. She'd told Naomi they would close early for rest, but really, she just wanted the quiet, the kind that allows a heart to think without interruption. Naomi sat at the back table, peeling oranges for the fruit jars, humming softly to herself. She had been sleeping better lately, eating better too. Her cheeks had regained their glow, and though her belly had grown noticeably rounder, she moved with an ease that only grace or gratitude could give. Evelyn stood near the counter, sorting through an old box of store ledgers. It was one of those tasks she had put off for years. Papers too old to matter, too sentimental to throw away. She pulled out old receipts, faded ink notes from her late husband, and beneath them, a small, leather-bound Bible, its cover soft with age, its corners worn. She froze. The name embossed in gold on the front had faded, but she could still make it out. Sarah Thompson. Her daughter's Bible. Evelyn sat down heavily, her breath catching. She hadn't seen it in nearly a decade. She remembered Sarah carrying it everywhere, to church, to study sessions, even on long drives. After the accident, she'd looked for it, but it had vanished, and now here it was, quietly waiting at the bottom of a forgotten box. Naomi looked up. "Miss Evelyn, you all right?" Evelyn blinked rapidly, wiping at her eyes. "I'm fine, dear, just found something I thought was lost." Naomi walked over, drying her hands on a towel. "May I see?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded, handing her the Bible. Naomi ran her fingers gently over the cover. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Was my daughter's," Evelyn said softly. "She used to write in the margins, notes, prayers, bits of poetry she liked. She said her Bible was a conversation, not a book." Naomi smiled faintly. That sounds like her. Evelyn frowned slightly.
Like her.
Naomi looked startled, then laughed nervously. I just mean, like the kind of person she must have been. From the way you talk about her. Evelyn relaxed, nodding. Yes, she was like that. Naomi carefully opened the Bible. The thin pages whispered as she turned them, revealing underlined verses and soft pencil notes. On one page from the book of Isaiah, a small folded letter fell out, yellowed and delicate. Evelyn's breath caught again. She hadn't known there was anything hidden inside. Naomi reached for it, then paused. Should I? Evelyn nodded. Please. Naomi unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably Sarah's. Neat, round, confident. The letter wasn't long. Dear Mama, if you ever find this, it means you've gone looking for something you lost. Maybe me, maybe yourself. I hope by then you've forgiven the world a little. There's a verse I keep coming back to. Isaiah 43:19. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I don't know what it means yet, but I think one day it will make sense. Don't close your heart. Mama, God's not done with us yet, love. Sarah. The words blurred as tears filled Evelyn's eyes. She pressed the letter to her chest, whispering, Lord, forgive me. I thought you were done. I thought there was nothing left for me. Naomi stood silently beside her, the weight of the moment pressing in. Not heavy, but holy. Then Evelyn looked up at her, eyes red but radiant. Do you know that verse? Naomi nodded slowly. I do. My mama used to say it all the time, when things were hard. She said God was always doing something new, even when we couldn't see it. Evelyn's throat tightened. Your mama, Denise, she used to come here, you know, helped me stock shelves, made me laugh when the days were long. She was your mother, wasn't she? Naomi froze, color draining from her face. How do you know her name? Evelyn's voice trembled but was steady. Because she was my Sarah's best friend. I saw her picture. In your locket. Naomi reached for the locket instinctively, clutching it as though it might stop time. I didn't know, she whispered. Mama told me about a Miss Sarah she loved like a sister. She said she wanted me to find people like her. People with hearts like hers. Evelyn smiled through her tears. You did, sweetheart. You found her mother instead. Naomi covered her mouth, sobbing. This can't be real. Oh, it's real, Evelyn said softly. Too real for coincidence. That verse, your mama, my daughter, they've both been telling us the same thing all along. She picked up the Bible again, pointing to the verse Sarah had underlined. Behold, I am doing a new thing. The words glowed faintly in the light, the ink slightly darker from time. Evelyn traced the letters with her finger, her voice barely a whisper. He's doing it right here, Naomi. In this little market, between us. Naomi nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Maybe this is the new thing. They sat in silence after that, side by side, the Bible between them. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, spilling light through the store windows. Dust motes turned to gold in the air, like small blessings suspended. Evelyn reached over and took Naomi's hand. You and this baby, you're not alone anymore. You hear me? Naomi nodded, unable to speak. And when that child comes, Evelyn continued, her voice firm but tender, he'll know where he comes from. From two women who were strangers once, but never meant to be. Naomi smiled through her tears. He'll know love. Real love. Love, Evelyn said softly, and a verse from Isaiah to grow on. They both laughed then, the kind of laughter that breaks sorrows back. That night, Evelyn placed Sarah's Bible on the store's front counter, where the sunlight would touch it each morning. She didn't dust it or hide it away. She let it sit open to the page that had reunited her with hope. Naomi came to stand beside her. You're keeping it out? Yes, Evelyn said, smiling faintly. This market's seen everything else. It can see faith, too, Naomi nodded. Then we'll read from it together every morning. Evelyn's eyes shone. I'd like that. As the evening light dimmed, Evelyn reached for the shop door and flipped the sign to closed. Outside, the world went on. Traffic, laughter, and the sound of children playing somewhere down the street. But inside Willow Street Market, a quiet miracle had unfolded, not the kind sung about in choirs or written in the papers. The quieter kind. The kind where grief becomes grace and two broken hearts find they've been parts of the same story all along. The days that followed the discovery of Sarah's Bible felt almost sacred. There was a peace in the air around Willow Street Market, the kind of quiet that comes after long storms, when even silence feels like a blessing. Evelyn and Naomi began each morning by reading a verse aloud before unlocking the store doors. Sometimes it was Naomi's voice, clear, soft, full of new conviction. Other times it was Evelyn's, low and worn but steady. The customers noticed the change too. There was laughter again behind the counter, a lightness in Evelyn's step, and a gentleness in the way Naomi greeted people that made even the most hurried shopper pause. But peace, like weather, is not permanent. By the end of the week, clouds began to gather again, both above the town and within it. The sky darkened early that Thursday, gray turning to charcoal. A storm front was pushing in from the east, the kind that made windows rattle and awnings snap. The town radio warned of flash floods along the river. Most shops closed early. Evelyn debated doing the same, but a stubborn practicality, or perhaps faith, made her stay open a little longer. Naomi, however, had been feeling unwell all day. She had said nothing at first, not wanting to worry Evelyn, but as the evening drew near, she began to feel the ache tighten across her back and stomach. Dull at first, then sharp, pulsing in rhythm. She was in her 8th month now, and though she'd read that early contractions could happen, something about the pain felt different. Deeper. Certain? Evelyn noticed her pale face as she restocked the shelves. "You're wincing, sweetheart," she said, setting down a crate. "Are you all right?" Naomi managed a weak smile. "Just a little tired. I think I'll sit for a bit," but when she turned to walk, her knees gave out. Evelyn caught her before she hit the ground, her heart lurching in terror. "Lord, not now," Evelyn whispered, lowering her gently to the chair behind the counter. "Naomi, talk to me." "What's wrong?" Naomi's breathing came quick and shallow. It's starting," she gasped. Evelyn's mind raced. "Starting? You mean, but it's too early." Naomi nodded, clutching her stomach. "I know. I can't stop it." Outside, thunder cracked open the sky. Rain began in sheets, hammering against the glass, drowning the sound of Evelyn's next breath. "Okay," Evelyn said, her voice trembling but resolute. "We'll get help. Stay with me." She grabbed the phone, dialing the emergency number, but the line crackled. Static, then silence. The storm had downed the wires. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. Naomi whimpered softly, another contraction taking her. Evelyn rushed to her side, pressing her hand to her shoulder. "Breathe, Naomi. In through your nose, out through your mouth, like this." Naomi tried, trembling. "It's too soon," she cried. "The baby, what if—" Evelyn cut her off gently. "No what ifs. You hear me? That child's a fighter, just like his mama." Lightning flashed outside, followed by another crash of thunder. The store lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the market. Only the weak glow of the oil lamp in the storeroom remained. The same lamp that had witnessed their first meeting. Evelyn grabbed it, setting it on the table beside Naomi. The flickering light painted the room in gold and shadow. "Hold on, sweetheart," Evelyn whispered, her hands steady despite her shaking heart. "You're not alone. Not tonight." For the next hour the storm raged around them. The roof groaned under the weight of rain. Water pooled under the front door. Evelyn worked quietly, efficiently, laying blankets on the floor, boiling water on the small gas stove, whispering prayers under her breath. When another contraction hit, Naomi gripped her hand so tightly that Evelyn felt her own pulse echo in her fingertips. "Breathe, baby," Evelyn murmured. "Just breathe. You're doing fine." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared, I know," Evelyn said softly. "So was I when I had Sarah. But you know what helped?" Naomi shook her head, trembling, remembering I wasn't doing it alone. God was right there. He's here now, too. Naomi let out a shuddering laugh that broke into a sob. "You really believe that?" Evelyn squeezed her hand. "With everything I've got." The contractions came closer together now, minutes apart. Evelyn knew enough from memory and instinct to understand that help might not come in time. She said another prayer, this one not polite, but pleading. "Lord, I'm asking plain. Don't let her go through this alone. Guide my hands. Give her strength." Thunder answered like an amen. Naomi screamed then, a sound that cut through the roar of the rain, raw, primal, life calling out from the edge of pain. Evelyn held her, whispering encouragement, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "It's all right, honey. It's all right. You're almost there. Just one more push," and then, in a single trembling moment, the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. A cry, small, sharp, perfect, pierced the air. Evelyn's tears came before she even realized she was crying. She looked down to see the tiny, wet bundle in her hands, the baby's fists curled. Its voice a fierce protest against the world it had just entered. Naomi gasped, exhausted but alive, her hands reaching weakly. Evelyn laid the child against her chest. "It's a boy," she whispered, her voice breaking. Naomi's tears fell freely now, her face glowing in the soft lamplight. "A boy," she repeated. "My boy," Evelyn smiled, brushing a hand over the infant's head. "Strong lungs. He's going to be just fine." The storm outside began to ease, the thunder moving farther away, the rain softening to a rhythm-like heartbeat against the roof. In that little back room of Willow Street Market, under the hum of fading thunder and the glow of an oil lamp, 3 lives began again. Hours later, the rain had stopped completely. Evelyn stepped outside just long enough to see the street glistening under a pale dawn. She drew in a deep breath, the air fresh, rinsed clean. When she returned to the storeroom, Naomi was sleeping, her son curled against her chest. The lamp still flickered, casting a soft halo over them. Evelyn knelt beside the cot, her eyes filling again. Not with grief this time, but with awe. She whispered a verse she had once forgotten but now remembered by heart. "Behold, I am doing a new thing." Her voice cracked and she smiled. "You did it, Lord. You really did." She leaned forward, kissing Naomi's forehead, then the baby's tiny hand. "Welcome to the world, little one," she whispered. Welcome to Willow Street. The town would wake soon. The sun would rise over the church spire. The bakery would open its doors. And word would spread, not of scandal or pity, but of a miracle born during a storm. And for the first time in 10 years, Evelyn felt whole again. Morning broke over Willow Street like a soft hymn. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed and new. Sunlight glinted off puddles on the cracked pavement, birds resumed their song, and the scent of wet earth hung in the air like a benediction. The neon sign above Willow Street Market flickered once, then glowed steady again, as though it, too, had survived the night. Inside, the market was hushed. The oil lamp still burned low, its flame smaller now, but stubbornly alive. On the cot near the storeroom wall, Naomi Cooper slept with her newborn son resting on her chest. His breathing was small and rhythmic, his tiny hand curled against her collarbone. Evelyn Thompson sat beside them, her tired eyes tender. She had kept vigil most of the night, watching over them with a kind of fierce gratitude. Every so often, she would reach out to adjust the blanket or brush a curl from Naomi's damp forehead. Now, in the light of morning, she whispered softly, "You did it, sweetheart?" Naomi stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. The exhaustion in her face was heavy, but beneath it was something radiant. The quiet joy of a soul who has survived both fear and miracle. "Is he—" Naomi began, her voice barely a whisper. Evelyn smiled. "He's perfect." Naomi looked down at the baby, her eyes flooding again. "He's so small." "They all start that way," Evelyn said gently. "And then they grow, faster than you think." The baby stirred, making a small, sleepy sound. A sigh so delicate it could break a heart. Evelyn leaned closer, her voice softening further. "He looks just like you." Naomi laughed quietly, shaking her head. "Poor thing," Evelyn smiled. "Lucky thing." For a long while, they just sat there, the 2 women and the newborn between them, listening to the quiet. The world beyond the market could wait. Here, everything had slowed to the rhythm of breath and blessing. Eventually, Evelyn stood. "I'll go make some breakfast. You need strength, both of you." When she returned a few minutes later, balancing a tray with toast, eggs, and a small bowl of fruit, she found Naomi sitting upright, rocking gently, whispering to her baby. "What are you saying to him?" Evelyn asked softly. Naomi smiled. "Just telling him he's safe now." "That he's loved." Evelyn swallowed a lump in her throat. "He'll never doubt it." By afternoon, word had spread. Curtis Robinson was the first to arrive, hat in hand, face lit with amazement. "Heard there was a storm, baby," he said with a grin. "Had to see for myself." Evelyn chuckled. "Come in, but wash your hands first." Curtis did as told, then bent low to look at the newborn. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. "Welcome to Willow Street, little man." He looked at Naomi, his tone gentle. "You did good, miss." "Real good," she smiled, shy but proud. "Thank you, Mr. Robinson." Before long, others came. Mrs. Hazel Brown carrying a casserole. Pastor Daniel bringing a blessing, even the two women who had once whispered behind their hands. They arrived awkwardly at first, unsure if they would be welcome, but Evelyn greeted each with warmth. "This is Daniel," she said, introducing the baby. "Named after Pastor here." The pastor's eyes widened in surprise. "You named him after me?" Naomi nodded shyly. "You were the first to tell me I wasn't alone. I wanted him to carry that reminder." Pastor Daniel's voice trembled. "Then may he always remember that, and may this town never forget it." He prayed over the child, his words simple and tender. Around him, even those who had once gossiped bowed their heads. For the first time in a long while, the market felt like church. As days passed, life began to take shape again. Evelyn rearranged the storeroom to make space for a crib. Naomi, still recovering, insisted on helping with light chores. The baby, little Daniel Cooper Thompson, became the town's newest obsession. Customers brought small gifts, knitted socks, soft blankets, a wooden rattle carved by a retired carpenter. Naomi would thank each person with that soft grace of hers, the kind that made people feel forgiven for ever having doubted her. The whispers that once carried judgment now carried joy. "Have you seen that baby?" One woman said in line at the bakery. "Cutest thing in town." "He's got Evelyn's eyes," another replied. "Maybe it's just the light," said a third, though secretly she thought the same. The market was busier than it had been in years. People said they came for groceries, but everyone knew the real reason, to see the miracle baby and the two women who had defied the storm. One afternoon, Evelyn stood by the counter, watching Naomi rock Daniel near the window. Sunlight bathed them in soft gold, turning the air into something almost sacred. "You know," Evelyn said quietly, "Sarah would have loved him." Naomi looked up, smiling faintly. "I think she already does." Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. "I like to think so, too." They fell silent, content in the peace of it, the kind of peace that feels earned. Naomi looked down at her son. "Miss Evelyn?" "Yes, dear?" "I've been thinking—" She hesitated. "When I get back on my feet, I'd like to work here, full time. Help run the market." Evelyn blinked, surprised. "You'd want that?" Naomi nodded. "This place, it's more than a store. It's home now, for me, for him." Evelyn's eyes softened. Then it settled. "We'll run it together. You, me, and this little angel here." Naomi laughed. "He's no angel when he's hungry." "Neither was Sarah," Evelyn said, smiling. "Must be something in the blood." That night, after Naomi and Daniel had gone to sleep, Evelyn stood once more by the front window. The street outside shimmered in the lamplight. She could see their reflections faintly in the glass, her own gray hair, Naomi's sleeping form in the back, the small shape of the baby's crib. She whispered softly, "Thank you." It was not a prayer for something new, but a prayer of completion, of gratitude for what had already been restored. The verse from Isaiah echoed in her mind. "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth, do you not perceive it?" This quiet life in a small-town market, this unexpected family, it was the new thing, and she perceived it now, fully. Weeks later, the townspeople gathered outside Willow Street Market for the first community lunch the store had ever hosted. Tables lined the street, music played softly, and laughter filled the air. Naomi sat with Daniel in her arms while Evelyn handed out lemonade. Pastor Daniel raised a toast. "To new beginnings, and to the people who remind us that miracles don't always come with trumpets. Sometimes they come crying, wrapped in blankets, in a grocery store during a storm." Everyone laughed and clapped. Evelyn looked at Naomi, who smiled back, tears bright in her eyes. The town that had once judged now celebrated. The market that had once been lonely now overflowed with life. And the poor black, pregnant girl who had collapsed on a rainy afternoon was now the heart of Willow Street, a living testament that faith and love could make the smallest places holy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn held Daniel one last time before Naomi tucked him in. He reached up and gripped Evelyn's finger with surprising strength. She smiled. "You've got your mama's fight," she whispered. "And a bit of my Sarah's spirit, too." She kissed his forehead gently. "Welcome to your world, little one. It's better now that you're here." Outside, the streetlight flickered, steady and bright. No longer a warning, but a beacon. The sun hung low over Willow Street, washing the town in a warm, honeyed light. The market had closed early that day, Evelyn's idea. "We've earned a little quiet," she'd said with a wink. Inside, the air was soft and still. The shelves gleamed. The cash register rested. Even the old market clock seemed to tick slower. From the back room came the gentle hum of life, Naomi's voice, low and melodic as she sang to her baby. It had been a month since the storm, and little Daniel Cooper Thompson had already woven himself into the rhythm of the market. His tiny coos had become as familiar as the creak of the doorbell, his cries as natural as the sound of rain. Naomi had recovered well, though her body still moved with careful grace. She'd taken to wearing soft floral dresses and a white apron, her hair tied back with a scarf. There was a quiet dignity in her now, not the timid girl who had collapsed on a rainy afternoon, but a woman who had faced the storm and come through shining. That evening, after putting Daniel to sleep, she sat by the small table near the cot and opened a new notebook Evelyn had given her. Its pages were crisp, waiting. Evelyn had said it might help to write things down before life gets too busy to remember. Naomi smoothed the first page, took a breath, and began to write. "My dearest Daniel, you won't remember this day, or how the sun felt on the windows, or how your grandmother Evelyn is humming in the kitchen, but I will. I'll remember every sound, every smell, every heartbeat. You came into this world during a storm, not a gentle rain, but a loud, wild one. And I was so scared. But then something happened. The world went quiet, and I heard your cry. And in that sound, I heard every promise I ever needed to make. So here it is. My promise to you. I promise that you will always know love. Real love. The kind that doesn't leave when the wind gets strong. The kind that stays and holds you steady. I promise to tell you where you come from. About your grandmother Denise, who worked hard and prayed harder. About Miss Sarah, the woman in the photo who helped her when times were tough. About Miss Evelyn, who opened her door to a stranger and ended up finding family. And I promise that you will know faith. Not the easy kind, but the kind that takes work. The kind that stands even when you can't see the road ahead. The kind that saved us both. If ever you forget what hope looks like, look around this little market. You'll see it on every shelf, in every corner, in every kind face that helped bring you into this world. And if ever you feel lost, remember Isaiah 43:19, the verse your Aunt Sarah wrote, and the one that brought your Grandma Evelyn back to life. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth, do you not perceive it? You, my son, are that new thing? All my love, Mama. Naomi's handwriting was small and careful, but by the time she finished, tears had smudged the last few words. She pressed the pen to her lips, whispered a small prayer of thanks, and tucked the letter into the back of Sarah's Bible. It would stay there, she decided, between the pages of Isaiah, until Daniel was old enough to read it for himself. When Evelyn came in later, she found Naomi wiping her eyes.
"You all right, dear?"
Naomi smiled through her tears. "I was just writing something for him, for when he's older?" Evelyn nodded knowingly. "A mother's promise?" Naomi blinked. "How did you—" Evelyn smiled softly. "Because I wrote one too, for Sarah years ago. Never meant for her to find it, but she did. It's in that old Bible still, folded between the Psalms." Naomi looked at her in wonder.
"Maybe he'll find mine the same way." "Maybe," Evelyn said.
"Or maybe he'll just live it, without needing to read a word." They shared a smile. Two mothers bound not by blood, but by the stories they carried and the love they gave. The next day dawned bright and clear. Naomi opened the market with Daniel in her arms, humming as she turned the open sign. A few customers paused outside, waving. The town had come to see the market as something more than a place to buy things. It had become a symbol of grace. Mrs. Hazel Brown stopped by with a small plant in a clay pot. "For the baby," she said gruffly. "A little bit of life to grow alongside him." Naomi smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mrs. Hazel. We'll keep it by the window." Pastor Daniel dropped in later, smiling as he held the baby. "You know," he said, "there's something special about this child. He came with the storm, but he brought the calm. Evelyn chuckled. Just like his mama. That afternoon, Evelyn stood by the front counter, cleaning the glass. The sunlight caught Sarah's Bible, which still lay open to Isaiah 43:19. Naomi came to stand beside her, Daniel cradled in her arms. He looked so peaceful. Evelyn whispered. Naomi smiled. He always does when he hears your voice. Evelyn reached out, brushing the baby's cheek. He's family now, you know, Naomi nodded. So are you. They stood like that for a while. 2 women, 1 child. 3 generations of love stitched together by mercy. That night, when the lights were off and the market slept, the silver locket glimmered faintly on the table beside the Bible. In the locket's tiny photograph, 2 young women, Sarah and Denise, smiled into the camera, their laughter frozen in time. And now, their daughters, Evelyn and Naomi, carried that same light forward, passing it on to Daniel. The circle was complete. In the stillness of that hour, Evelyn whispered a prayer she hadn't said since her own daughter's birth. Thank you, Lord, for the new thing, for love that endures, for storms that pass, and for promises that keep. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, not with anger this time, but with peace. In the cradle, Daniel stirred once, then smiled in his sleep. The morning was still and silver, the kind of morning that seems to ask for silence. A light fog rolled off the hills beyond town, settling low over the grass like a blanket of memory. The road to Willow Hills Cemetery was narrow and lined with wildflowers that had sprung up after the last storm. The air smelled faintly of rain and pine. In the front seat of Evelyn's old car sat Naomi, her son Daniel asleep in her arms, wrapped in a knitted blanket. Evelyn drove slowly, her hands steady on the wheel. Neither woman spoke for a while. Words felt too small for what the day meant. It had been 10 years since Evelyn had driven this road. 10 years since she'd stood beside her daughter's grave. The last time she'd come angry. At God. At the world. At herself. Today she came with something different. Peace. Naomi reached out and touched Evelyn's hand. You sure you're ready for this? Evelyn nodded, her eyes misty but calm. Ready as I'll ever be. Maybe more than ready? They parked beneath an old oak tree, its leaves whispering gently in the breeze. Evelyn got out first, smoothing the wrinkles from her coat. Naomi followed carefully, holding the baby close against her chest. The 3 of them walked slowly along the winding path until the small marble headstone came into view. Sarah Thompson, 1988, 2015. Behold, I am doing a new thing. The same verse, carved into stone, that had followed them through every chapter of this story. Evelyn stopped a few feet away, her breath catching. For a long time she couldn't move. Then, with trembling hands, she knelt. Hello, sweetheart, she whispered. Her voice was soft but carried in the quiet air. She brushed away a few fallen leaves from the headstone and laid a single white lily across it. It's been a while, she said, her smile sad but real. I know you'd scold me for that. Naomi stood a few steps behind, respectful, swaying gently with the baby. Daniel stirred but didn't wake. Evelyn continued, her tone tender. I thought I lost everything when I lost you. I thought my story was done. Her fingers traced the engraved letters. But then a girl walked into my market, a scared, poor black pregnant girl, and she brought me back to life. Naomi blinked, tears gathering. Evelyn turned and beckoned her forward. Come here, Naomi. Naomi stepped closer, kneeling beside her. Evelyn took her hand, then looked back at the grave. This is my daughter, Sarah, and somehow I think you already know her. Naomi nodded slowly. I feel like I do. Evelyn smiled faintly. She was friends with your mama, Denise. Best friends. They used to laugh about how life would take them different ways but promised they'd never lose faith in what was good. Naomi's eyes filled. Mama used to talk about her too, the girl with sunshine in her hair. She said Sarah taught her that kindness wasn't a gift you give when it's easy, but when it's hardest. Evelyn laughed softly through her tears. That sounds like my Sarah. She reached out and touched the baby's small hand. And look at this. Both their legacies right here in this little boy. Naomi smiled, glancing down at her son. I think they both had a hand in bringing him here. I do too, Evelyn said, voice trembling. I truly do. For a long while neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rustle of the trees and the soft cooing of the child. Evelyn closed her eyes and began to pray. Not the formal prayers she'd once recited from a hymnal, but something personal, like a conversation between old friends. Thank you, Lord, for this mercy, for bringing me back here not in sorrow but in gratitude. Thank you for this child, a new thing, just like you promised. And thank you for these two women, my Sarah in heaven and my Naomi here beside me, who remind me that love never ends. It just changes its address. Her voice faltered at the last words, but Naomi's hand found hers, steady and warm. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the fog lift as sunlight slowly broke through the trees. When Evelyn finally stood, her knees creaked, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in years. Naomi shifted Daniel in her arms. Would it be all right if I said something? Evelyn smiled. Of course. Naomi knelt beside the headstone. Miss Sarah, she said softly, I don't know if you can hear me, but I wanted to say thank you for loving my mama, for writing that verse, for giving Miss Evelyn hope again, and for somehow leading me here. I promise I'll take care of her, and I'll raise Daniel to know your name. A breeze stirred then, soft, cool, and unmistakably gentle. It rustled the leaves above them, carrying the scent of lilies and rain. Evelyn and Naomi looked at each other and smiled through their tears. Guess she heard you, Evelyn whispered. Naomi nodded. Guess she did. On the drive home, the air in the car felt different. Lighter, freer. Naomi looked out the window as the town came into view again, the familiar storefronts bathed in golden light. Evelyn glanced at her. You all right? Naomi smiled softly. I think so. Feels like something closed today, but in a good way. Evelyn nodded. Closed and opened, both. Naomi looked down at Daniel sleeping peacefully in her arms. You think she's watching us? Evelyn's eyes softened. Always. That evening, Evelyn placed the white lily from the grave in a small vase on the counter beside Sarah's Bible. Naomi laid the silver locket next to it. Together they read aloud the verse one last time. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth, do you not perceive it? When they finished, the market bell chimed softly, though no one had opened the door. Evelyn looked toward it, then at Naomi and smiled. Must be the wind, she said. Naomi grinned. Or maybe just her way of saying hello. They both laughed, their voices echoing gently through the quiet store. The sound of two women, one legacy and a future finally at peace. Outside, the sunset painted Willow Street in gold and rose. The market glowed from within, its sign shining steady, Willow Street Market, open to all. That night, as Naomi rocked Daniel to sleep, Evelyn watched from the doorway. The lamplight gilded their silhouettes. She thought of how her life had begun again, not in youth, but in grace. She whispered softly, more to herself than to anyone, some storms don't destroy you. They deliver you. And in that quiet house of mercy, where grief had once lived, love had made its home again. Time is gentle when it's kind. Years passed quietly on Willow Street, measured not by calendars or clocks, but by small, beautiful things, a child's laughter echoing down an aisle, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery next door, the way the evening sun turned the market windows to gold every summer. The old neon sign above Willow Street Market still glowed faithfully, though its corners had begun to rust. Inside, things had changed, and yet everything had stayed the same. The market was brighter now, shelves freshly painted, baskets of fruit always full, a handmade sign above the counter that read, Faith, Family, Fresh Produce. Naomi stood behind the counter, her apron dusted with flour, her smile warm as she rang up a customer. She was older now, not yet 30, but carrying herself with the calm confidence of a woman who had seen life's worst and chosen to meet it with grace. And beside her, helping stack the apples into neat little pyramids, was Daniel Cooper Thompson, and 7 years old, tall for his age, his curls bouncing as he worked. His skin was the soft bronze of summer, his eyes bright with that same curious spark that once shone in his grandmother Sarah's. Careful, sweetheart, Naomi said, laughing as he wobbled on tiptoe to reach the top of the basket. You'll topple them again, Daniel grinned. They're fine, Mama. See? He placed the last apple triumphantly. Evelyn, now 68, watched from her usual stool near the window. Her hair had gone completely silver, and her hands carried the stories of time. But her eyes still had the same warmth, the same quiet humor. He's got your stubborn streak, she teased. Naomi looked over her shoulder, smiling. I'd say he got it from you, Evelyn chuckled. Don't blame me for that one. Daniel turned, his grin wide. Grandma Evelyn, look! I stacked all of them, Evelyn applauded softly. Perfect job, darling. You're a born shopkeeper, he puffed up proudly. When I grow up, I'm going to run this place, just like you and Mama. Naomi knelt beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. And what are you going to call it? He thought for a moment, serious. Then, smiling, said, Hope Market. Evelyn's eyes glistened. That's a fine name. That afternoon, after the last customer left, Naomi locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. The three of them sat at the small wooden table in the back room, the same one where Naomi had once written her letter to Daniel. The old Bible still sat open there, its pages worn from years of use. Evelyn ran her fingers over it gently. Still holding up, she murmured. Naomi nodded. Every morning, just like always, Daniel leaned forward, curious. Can I read today's verse? Naomi smiled. Go ahead, sweetheart. He squinted at the small print, his voice careful but confident. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth, do you not perceive it? He looked up proudly. Isaiah 43:19. Evelyn laughed softly. That's my boy, Naomi smiled. That verse has been in this family longer than any of us realize. Evelyn reached out and placed her hand over both theirs. And it always will be. Later that week, on a quiet Sunday, Naomi drove them all back to Willow Hills Cemetery. It had become a ritual now. Every year, they went to visit Sarah's grave. Daniel loved to bring flowers, and Evelyn always brought her stories. The cemetery was bright and green that day. The wildflowers had grown thick, dancing in the breeze. Daniel ran ahead, clutching a small bouquet of daisies. There she is, he called. Evelyn smiled. He talks about Sarah like she's his playmate, she whispered. Naomi laughed. Maybe she is in her own way. When they reached the headstone, Daniel crouched down and placed the flowers carefully at its base. Hi, Miss Sarah, he said cheerfully. It's me again. He looked up at Naomi. Can I tell her something? Naomi nodded. Of course, he took a deep breath. I just wanted to say thank you. Mama told me you helped her find Grandma Evelyn. And if you hadn't, I wouldn't be here. Evelyn's eyes filled. Out of the mouths of babes, she whispered. Naomi smiled through her tears. You said it perfectly, sweetheart. They stood there for a long moment, the wind weaving around them softly, like a voice that had no need for words. Finally, Evelyn knelt beside Daniel, pointing to the verse engraved on the stone. Do you remember what this says? He nodded solemnly. It says God's always doing new things, Evelyn smiled. That's right. And sometimes those new things look like people. Naomi looked at her, understanding. Like him, Evelyn nodded. Exactly like him. That evening they returned home as the sun dipped low, casting the street in amber. The market windows reflected the last of the light. Naomi set Daniel's schoolbook on the counter. Evelyn began closing the till. The radio played softly, a hymn about grace. Daniel stood by the window watching fireflies gather near the lamppost. Mama? He asked suddenly. Yes, baby? Do you think people can see us from heaven? Naomi smiled gently. I think they can. He thought about that, then grinned. Then I hope Miss Sarah and Grandma Denise are watching. I want to make them proud. Evelyn's throat tightened. You already do, darling. Naomi reached over, hugging him close.
Every single day. That night, after closing the market, Evelyn sat alone for a while, gazing at the old sign outside.
The words Willow Street Market glowed faintly in the dark, flickering once, twice, then holding steady. She thought about how far they'd come, from storms and sorrow to this. A home, a family, a future. On the counter sat Sarah's Bible and Naomi's letter to Daniel, kept safe between its pages. Evelyn smiled and whispered, It's all come full circle, my love. She turned off the lamp, letting the market rest. The bell above the door gave one last soft ring, not from wind this time, but something gentler, something unseen. Outside, the night spread calm across Willow Street. Fireflies danced above puddles. The world was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now, not emptiness, but fulfillment. In the upstairs apartment, Naomi slept with Daniel tucked against her side. Evelyn in the next room whispered one last prayer before bed. Thank you for the circle unbroken, for mercy that finds us, even when we're lost. The verse from Isaiah echoed in her thoughts, no longer just a promise, but a memory fulfilled. And down below, under the hum of the old refrigerator and the smell of tomorrow's bread rising in the oven, Willow Street Market stood as a testament that miracles don't always thunder from heaven. Sometimes they're whispered through kindness, sometimes they walk in from the rain, and sometimes they grow up stacking apples in the same store where faith once began again. 25 years later, Willow Street was no longer the sleepy town it once was. The small wooden storefronts had given way to bright awnings and painted windows. The church bell still rang on Sundays, and the scent of baked bread still drifted down from the corner bakery. And there, still standing at the heart of it all, older, renovated but familiar, was Willow Street Market. The neon sign had been replaced with a new one, but the lettering was almost the same. It read, Hope Market, since 2015. Inside, the air still carried that same comforting blend of cinnamon, coffee, and sunlight. Wooden shelves lined the walls, now filled with fresh produce and handmade goods. The old bell above the door jingled softly as a man stepped inside. He was tall, early 30s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. His hair was dark and curled, his skin warm bronze under the light. Around his neck hung a small silver locket. Daniel Cooper Thompson, the baby born in a storm, the child who had stacked apples, the boy who had grown up surrounded by faith, forgiveness, and love. Now he was the owner of the very place that had brought 3 generations of hearts together. He paused by the door, breathing in deeply. The market smelled like home. A young woman behind the counter smiled at him. "Morning, Mr. Thompson. Fresh batch of oranges just came in. Should I put them by the window display?" Daniel smiled. "Yes, that's perfect. The sunlight makes them glow." He walked toward the back of the market, where a small framed photo hung on the wall. 2 women smiling side by side. Naomi Cooper Thompson and Evelyn Thompson. Beneath it was a brass plaque that read, "In memory of the women who believed in miracles, and taught the rest of us to do the same." Daniel ran his thumb over the edge of the frame, his chest tightening with affection. "Hi, Grandma. Hi, Mama," he whispered. He could almost hear them. Naomi's gentle laughter, Evelyn's soft hum as she counted the day's earnings. He smiled through the ache of missing them. They had passed within a year of each other. Naomi, first, peacefully in her sleep, Evelyn not long after, as if her heart simply followed. The town had closed its shops the day of their joint memorial. Pastor Daniel Lopez, now old and gray, had called it the Day of Mercy. Daniel still remembered the crowd outside the market that morning. Faces from every walk of life, some who had been helped by Naomi's quiet kindness, others who still came by because Evelyn had once remembered their names when no one else did. 2 women, Pastor Daniel had said, who didn't wait for miracles, they became them. Now, decades later, Daniel ran the market with that same spirit. Every Thursday, he left a basket of food outside for anyone in need, no questions asked. Every Sunday, he kept the Bible open on the counter. Always to the same page, Isaiah 43:19. That afternoon, after the customers cleared out, Daniel unlocked the small door behind the counter, the old storeroom, still preserved just as it had been when Naomi first lived there. The cot was gone now, replaced by a sturdy wooden table and a single vase that always held fresh lilies. On the wall hung a framed letter, his mother's handwriting, the one she had written for him as a baby. He stood before it now, reading the words he knew by heart. "My dearest Daniel, you came into this world during a storm, but even then, I knew you were the new thing God had promised. Never forget that love is your inheritance, faith is your legacy, and wherever kindness is needed, that's where you belong." He smiled faintly, tears stinging his eyes. "I've tried, Mama," he whispered.
"Every day." He turned then and picked up the old silver locket from the table.
Inside the photo had faded, but the outlines were still clear. Sarah and Denise, their smiles eternal. He closed it gently and slipped it back around his neck. Outside, the afternoon sun began to dip toward evening. Daniel stepped to the door of the market and looked out over Willow Street. Children riding bicycles, shopkeepers laughing, a group of teens helping an old man cross the road. The town had changed, yes, but the spirit of it, the kindness seeded by 2 women long ago, still lived in every heart that walked its streets. As he stood there, a light drizzle began to fall, soft, playful rain that made the world shimmer. He smiled, lifting his face toward the sky. "Guess you're saying hello again," he murmured. The bell above the door chimed just then. A young woman stood there, African American, about Naomi's age when she'd first arrived. Her clothes were damp, her eyes uncertain, one hand resting gently on her stomach. I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know where else to go. I saw the sign, Hope Market. Are you hiring?" Daniel's smile was instant, kind, familiar. He stepped forward and extended his hand. "Come in," he said gently. "You're safe here." The young woman hesitated, then took his hand. As she crossed the threshold, the rain outside grew stronger, pattering against the windows like memory. The market glowed warmly under its lights. Daniel reached for a towel and handed it to her. "You can sit by the heater for a bit. I'll get you some tea." Her lips trembled. "Thank you. You're very kind," he smiled. "Just carrying on a family tradition." As he turned to make tea, his gaze fell once more on the Bible open on the counter. The verse caught his eye, the same one that had guided every generation before him. "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth, do you not perceive it?" He smiled. "Yes, Lord," he whispered, "I see it." And in that small glowing market, where a storm had once brought two strangers together, another story began. A new thing springing forth again.